Welcome everyone. Shortly we'll take you through insights from the CIPS-Hays Procurement Salary Survey. We've got a great panel today. As always, I encourage you to use the chat function, and in particular today we would like to know where you're from and how long you've been in the profession. Welcome to everyone. Settle back. This is a great lunchtime session, or for those who are further afield, a great afternoon session coming forward. You've reached the CIPS-Hays Salary Guide and Insights webinar. Please use the chat function and tell us where you're joining us from today and how long you've been in the profession. That'll help us answer some of the questions that you may have. Welcome everybody. I'd like to advise everybody that this webinar is currently being recorded and will be made available to you next week. Firstly, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri Woi and Wurrung people and Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, and they're the traditional custodians on the land on which I present today, and we pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples today. And to my New Zealand colleagues, Tina Koko, Tina Koko, Tina Koko Katawa. Welcome to the over 100 registered attendees today. We're in for a treat. But first, a little bit about CIPS. For those of you who don't know us, the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply, or CIPS, we're a global professional body for procurement and supply professionals. We are dedicated to promoting best practice, continuous improvement in professional standards, and also raising awareness of the contribution that procurement and supply can make to organisations and also to the community at large. Now, for the reason we're gathering here today. In a year like no other, procurement and supply in Australia and New Zealand has been thrust into spotlight by that pandemic. And as supply chains and lines have been impacted, the profession has become more visible to the wider public, and it's increasing awareness and the appreciation of the role that many of you do. So annually, we join forces with Hays on the Salary Guide, and this is a way that we can evaluate the perceptions of procurement, and we can also benchmark salaries and bonuses for different roles. But it's also an opportunity to highlight career aspirations and to gain insights in how to attract, retain, and develop our talent. Today, we'll take you through the insights from the CIPS-Hays Procurement Salary Guide, but importantly, we'll spend most of the session hearing those insights really come to life through a great lineup of procurement professionals. So before we get started, do use the chat function, as already some people are doing, and tell us how long you've been in the profession and where you're calling in from. This will really help us better direct our thoughts and our insights throughout today's session. And of course, any questions you have, place them in the Q&A box, and we hope to get them towards the end of the presentation today. So let's get started with the report. Perceptions of procurement and supply management remain consistently positive, with most respondents to the survey believing the profession is valued within their organisation. Encouragingly, there is increasing recognition from senior audiences that directors and heads of the departments are really understanding what procurement specialists can offer. And this has increased from 66% to 70% this year. Perhaps the pandemic has had a role to play in this, emphasising the strategic benefits of the strong procurement function. And while procurement is being heard internally, there is still work needed to ensure this is maximised externally. Globally recognised, MCIPS demonstrates a commitment to keeping skills fresh and relevant. This mindset is very much in demand amongst employers who are always in search of self-motivated and talented staff. And in addition, 20% higher salary, MCIPS also offers a really positive career outlook, with 1/3 of employees requesting MCIPS or at least studying towards MCIPS as a preference when recruiting. And this is likely to be driven by the technical knowledge gained from those qualifications, as well as the dedication required to pursue it. That is, individuals motivated to invest in time to further study and showing ambition and a real thirst to succeed. MCIPS also signals that an individual has achieved an internationally recognised award, signalling to their peers and employers that their excellence and credibility within the profession. As we all know, managing risk in the supply chain is always an important part of the procurement role, but this has been especially true over the last 12 to 18 months, with 49% of our respondents thinking so. Risk mitigation should always be a key focus for procurement and supply, whether that be avoiding threats to reputation, maintaining security of supply, or ensuring the sustainability of our sources. However, in the last year, procurement professionals have combined these responsibilities with constant disruption and change, and the need to continuously adapt sourcing strategies to effectively manage risk, with 48% being seen as strategic partners to the business. And collaboration has absolutely been essential, finding ways of building resilience in their supply chain, with 42 ensuring engagement with procurement at the outset of a project, 42%. And as with last year, we're also seeing internal challenges dominating, and the procurement professional expressing concerns that they are not seen as strategic partners to business. It is important that procurement function is championed within the organisation to ensure we can fully deliver against stakeholders' objectives and on strategic projects. And of course, where possible, engage early. That 42% of people say engage us early in your strategies to help raise the profile and value and highlight the value of the profession, with 42% recognising this is a key challenge in the next 12 months. It's important to ensure that our procurement function is heard and works with key stakeholders to achieve corporate goals. In a year, as we all know, we've seen huge challenges in the workplace, and there's still a struggle to find the right talent, with 53% of employees have struggled to find the right talent. And crucially, employers need to recognise changing mindsets around the role of work and reflect these changing priorities in their hiring practices. Employees are looking beyond salaries and financial benefits. They're looking towards ethical and sustainable practices and initiatives that will really support their purpose and their well-being and help them maintain a healthy work-life balance. And in addition, the talent pool in Australia and New Zealand is very different this year. Many roles are typically filled by expats who have been affected by the strict travel rules and border closures that have prevented a lot of talent from entering our region. So it's therefore really important. There's never been a better time to plan and to advocate for capability growth. We must do this in order to prevent gaps in our teams and in our organisations now and into the future. This has become quite evident. And we'll talk more to our panellists shortly about this. The key challenge with hiring managers that they're facing is the difficulty in finding applicants with the right skills, in particular, sector-specific skills, those technical skills, and evidence of formal procurement training. And this really highlights the benefit of achieving or studying towards MCIPS. It sets candidates apart from other applicants and tackles the need for professionals with strong technical skills. With 41% expecting to increase the number in their procurement team in the next 12 months, it's really important that companies reflect a positive, inclusive, and understanding image that aligns with candidates' expectations. And that's really to ensure that we attract the best talent. The three main reasons to move jobs is the content of work, salary, and management team. And while, as I said, Salary is one of the leading motivators when it comes to securing a new job. But last year, we've seen that expectations have been really reshaped around what that ideal job in procurement looks like. So employers need to recognise changing mindsets around the role of work and reflect these changing priorities in their hiring practices. The pandemic has seen a significant impact on the procurement profession and the skills required to work in it. And as is the case for many professions, we've had to change and adapt to new circumstances and ways of working, which presents both challenges and many opportunities. Soft skills have proved vital in managing unpredictable supply chains. And as demands on procurement professionals have continued to evolve, so have the associated skills needed to secure in the role. As with last year, soft skills continue to dominate the top skills in demand across all sectors, with internal stakeholder management coming out on top this year at 55%, followed by communication and influencing skills. At a time when procurement specialists are relied upon more than ever, internal stakeholder management is crucial in order to continue to raise the profile of the procurement function through effective communication. And many of us have transitioned to a remote working environment, and we've needed to adapt our communication styles accordingly. Arguably, strong communication skill sets result in better performance across all soft skills. Good communicators are better able to lead, influence, and manage stakeholders and suppliers. Now, this suggests that a focus on training individuals in this vital skill is likely to be a significant boost to any procurement team in the future. One of the many things the pandemic and shift to a greater remote working has highlighted for procurement is the varied needs and requirements of employees. To operate effectively, organisations need to ensure that their workforce truly represents the community they operate and serve in. When those from a diverse background work together to create a service we rely on, the outcome is much more likely to benefit everyone. And 91% agree that a diverse and inclusive environment is a more attractive place to work for the prospective candidates, which increases access to skills and a wider talent pool. It is clear that procurement professionals celebrate the many benefits that ED&I, equity, diversity, inclusion brings, not only to an internal talent pool, but the organisation's culture and also the company's reputation. So engaging in diverse and inclusive hiring practices not only helps to attract new talent, but encourages applications from underrepresented groups. But 90% believe that diverse and inclusive hiring practices ensure a more open and trustworthy workplace, therefore helping to really retain staff as well. And in addition to those benefits, organisations engage in diverse and inclusive hiring practices. They see greater creativity and innovation in teams. It helps employees reach their full potential and also improves productivity in the team. It's a win-win, really. Now, I'm delighted to have our recruitment specialist, Janelle Ruston, who's Business Director for Hays Recruitment, for her insights and findings. So over to you, Janelle.
Thanks, Sharon. Moving along. So, yeah, as Sharon mentioned, so I'm a Business Director at Hays. I've been with Hays for 14 years, 10 of those recruiting within the procurement space. So very excited to be a part of this presentation today. And when I was looking back on this time last year, the landscape looked very different, as you know, there were a lot more limited employment opportunities. There were more people on the market looking for work, and obviously most of the country was in some sort of restricted working environment. But you know, a really unknown time when we didn't know how long we were going to be in this position for. But fast forward 12 months, we're still here. So today's agenda, I'm going to be covering the profile of procurement and a brief market overview. I'll be looking at the key challenges in today's market and what skills are required to meet those challenges. I'll provide an overview on salaries. We'll look at employment benefits. And then finally, the advice for employers and employees for the year ahead. Great, so moving on to the profile of procurement. So I'm very pleased to say that 2021 has been a positive year for procurement employment opportunities. The market really turned a corner earlier this year following a period which was mainly focused around steering organisations through an unknown period. Today, the market is much more optimistic, with the number of newly created roles increasing each week. But consequently, the new challenge is around the competition for highly skilled candidates and looking at how organisations embrace their value proposition. So we are expecting the value and perception of procurement professionals to increase over the next 6 to 18 months, as the role of procurement is critical to support and guide any business through a crisis. Interestingly, from the Hays salary guide, just over half of those surveyed are engaged at the start of a project, which is a close correlation to CIPS, sitting at 42%. Now, this is something that we've seen for a number of years and need to consider if it's due to internal stakeholders not being aware of procurement capabilities, or is it due to a lack of profile to promote procurement planning from the outset? As too often we find organisations engaging contractors and consultants after a procurement has commenced, which limits the positive impact we can truly have on shaping the approach and then how suppliers can then offer their goods or services under these arrangements. So as we move on to key challenges and what skills are required to meet those challenges. Now, all three of these skills were identified as challenges across both reports: influencing, communication, and internal stakeholder management, with all of these skills being connected to how procurement is viewed within an organisation. So we know more work is needed to promote procurement function internally, but to ensure the stakeholders are aware that you can not only do the job, but they are confident in your ability to do the job well. Now, to tackle that, education and qualifications is one way to immediately gain the confidence and credibility. By undertaking formal qualifications, this will not only deepen your industry knowledge and expertise, but it will immediately gain the confidence from the business. For the year ahead, your ability to influence internal stakeholders as we manage risk is only going to increase as the world becomes more volatile, as we are seeing more of an increase on diversifying supply chains through to onshoring manufacturing and services like call centres. So moving on to review salaries. So despite all the challenges, 2020 was a year with more focus around where and how money was spent. So that said, the only salary increases to note are as a response to the deep skill shortages across the profession, with many clients needing to increase salaries offered due to the limited number of candidates that they're able to consider. From the report, the average procurement salary remained consistent at $140,000. And that said, we did see an increase of 5.5% as the average pay rise, which is very high considering how many organisations put a hold on annual salary increases last year. Now, for entry-level and tactical procurement roles, we've seen average salaries increase due to the lack of new candidates entering the profession. And on the flip side, organisations who are not willing to budge on only considering candidates who have previous experience in a similar role. From the Hays Guide, it was reported 55% of employers will be looking to increase salaries over the next year, and with close to 70% of the respondents saying that an increase to their salary would reflect better in their performance and that it would also impact their retention and overall engagement to an organisation. So moving on to employer benefits, which has been a hot topic for 2021. And it's no surprise to everyone that flexible working has proven to be a viable option for most organisations and is rapidly becoming a mainstay of employee benefits and is often a non-negotiable when candidates are considering a new role. Mental health, wellbeing and work-life balance initiatives are increasing too, with more employers providing financial support towards professional development, upskilling, training to ensure staff can grow their skills in-house and therefore remain in an organisation. Other sought-after benefits that we've seen employers offering include additional employer super contributions, paid parental leave for both parties, healthcare benefits, income protection, salary packaging, gym and fitness memberships, additional annual leave for loyalty, flexibility around working hours, and annual salary reviews. Now, while most employers won't be able to offer all of these benefits, it's important to ask the employee what's important to them and how the career can be shaped to ensure their retention and overall job satisfaction. And finally, we move on to advice for employers and employees for the year ahead. So, as many employers have reevaluated their employee value proposition and how they can attract candidates, it still remains an inconsistency with how hiring managers are approaching their recruitment campaigns. As we are working in a time where employers are needing to focus more time on what they can offer now and for the candidate's career to set themselves apart from other employers. And for employees, there still remains a strong focus on not only the technical experience they can bring to a role, but how they can communicate, influence, and get the buy-in from stakeholders. All of these attributes need to be demonstrated during the recruitment process. So where we are seeing the skill shortages across the country include commercial managers in Victoria's active infrastructure market, procurement officers and senior procurement officers in New South Wales construction industry. For Northern Territory, defence-related jobs in construction or maintenance has seen a need for contract administrators, buyers and procurement officers. For WA, procurement and contract officers across all industries are in demand. That said, mining is very busy with the price of iron ore and gold, which is holding well, and there is an increased requirement for lithium and copper procurement experience. And for ACT, procurement officers, senior procurement specialists and contract managers, there's a huge surge of growth across the federal government, particularly within healthcare, employment, ICT and defence projects. But to summarise, the year ahead is looking very positive for both employers and employees. And looking at that figure of 84% of candidates within the profession considering a move, now is the time for employers to think seriously about how they can approach their recruitment or retain their existing staff, as candidates are looking for much more than an increase in their salary when considering a new employer. Thank you, and back to you, Sharon.
Oh, terrific. Thanks, Janelle. Some great insights there in attracting and retaining talent. And I can see from the chat bar that we've got a lot of seasoned professionals with us as well, so from across the region. So thank you. And we're going to get Janelle to come back later for Q&A. So make sure you put your questions into the Q&A box so that we've got plenty to address to her later on. Thanks, Janelle. Now, next up, I'd like to invite our panellists for today's session, starting with Karla Davidson-Brown, who's a Fellow of the Institute and Head of Procurement at PAMU Landcorp Farming in New Zealand. Welcome, Karla. I'd also like to welcome Andrés Naranjo. He's MCIPS Procurement Transformation Lead at Holcim. Welcome. And Phillip McDonald, who is also MCIPS and General Manager of Procurement for Woolworths Group. And finally, Martina Foote, who's Senior Procurement Advisor and Consultant to the Australian Federal Government. Welcome, team. This is a great depth and breadth of experience. Thanks for joining us. Let's get stuck in. Our survey says that 70% of us believe that directors and heads of other departments in their organisation understand what procurement specialists can offer. Phil, I'm going to start with you. How are procurement professionals viewed and valued in your organisation, and has COVID had an impact on this?
Thanks, Sharon. So it's great to be here, having the opportunity to speak about something that I am very fond of, and that's procurement. And so for us, I mean, we are very valued within the organisation, and COVID did have a big impact on that. I mean, for us, we're very, I would say as a function, stakeholder orientated. We're more engaged with the business and understanding what their objectives are than we are category orientated. And so for that to work and that embedding, you really need to understand what your stakeholders are doing. COVID helped us because they relied on us in order to keep our stores open, and that was a critical thing for us to make sure that there was the correct PPE, and that the stores could function as an essential service to support all of us in the community to ensure that we're fed and looked after. So for us, the function and the credibility of the function and the capability went from do we have the right sanitizers, do we have the right chemicals, the right PPE in the store, because it's just something that we should have versus the store will not open until we do have those. So we definitely got a great engagement from the business as a result of COVID. But I would say that the relationship between us and the business is great, but it can't just be done from our perspective. So what we do is at Woolworths, we have a voice of business stakeholder survey where we go out every 6 months to the organization. We ask some relatively simple questions about how we're servicing the business and get some feedback from our actual stakeholders. And that goes not only to the people that in the business, it goes to our fellow support functions. So whether it be legal, finance, risk, the team in human rights, we get all the feedback from our peer or co-support functions to ensure that we're playing our part with them as well in providing a comprehensive service. And out of that, for example, we had 80 individuals within the organization wanting us to have a follow-up conversation about the services we provide, good or bad. We want to hear it, because without that feedback from our stakeholders, we don't know whether we're being successful or not from their perspective, not so much from our perspective. But delivering the service also comes down to capability of the individuals in our function. And so we definitely have done a great partnership with CIPS in making sure that we are trained at the right level to perform the roles that we have within the organization. We had 9 people go through our corporate award program in our first cohort. We now have 15 team members that are going through and will graduate very soon with MCIPS, which is fantastic for those individuals, but also fantastic for us as a function and as a company to have that level of capability within our team. And so, yeah, for us, I think those are the very important things. Is definitely around the voice of the business stakeholders and getting the feedback, Sharon.
Yeah, great. Thank you. That's a really good tip around measuring your success as well. Thank you. Karla, I'm interested in putting a focus on where you work at PAMU Landcorp Farming and how this has influenced you, particularly over the COVID period.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon, and thanks also for having me today. It's a real privilege. And so, like you, Phillip, we've got an essential service here in the sense that we're running farms and the animals don't look after themselves. So, as a business, our people out on the front line are still working over these COVID crazy times. And I would say my reflection would be that I think procurement have worked really hard to have a great engagement across our business over the last 5 to 7 years. But I think over COVID that was heightened. And one example that comes to mind to demonstrate that is that our business, like probably most of them across the globe, has pulled together a crisis committee around COVID specific activities, and myself as the head of procurement have played a part in that crisis committee. Now, depending on what the crisis of the day is, procurement wouldn't necessarily get involved, and I think the value of procurement to the business as a function and the value of our supply chain relationships has come through really critical in that time, and this is one way that we've seen that reflected in the business. I also think the relationships that we've built and fostered with our suppliers and our supply chains has meant that we've been able to perform that really critical role back into our organisation and making sure that when we've got requirements of our suppliers, that our needs are prioritised where they can over others to ensure that our essential services could keep operating.
I've seen many of our procurement professionals go into crisis meetings and cancel meetings with me, which is promising, not the cancellations of meetings, but it is promising they're being seen in those crisis committees. Thanks, Karla. Andrés, let's point to your world, and also we're asking in the chat as well, how is procurement viewed in your organisation? Share us your comments on chat, and Andrés, over to you.
Thank you. Also very happy to be in the webinar today in such great company. Probably one of the most important things to say is that a crisis should never be wasted. And so this moment actually brought to the attention of a lot of people that perhaps didn't have that perception of the importance of having strong supply chains, not just procurement, not just purchasing, but a strong supply chain. We're very lucky in Holcim that we have a fantastic relationship with our stakeholders. It's not perfect, like any relationship you can imagine, but definitely this has allowed us to do quite a few things that perhaps before were not contemplated. We were able to invest in digital technology to expedite the purchasing side of procurement, which hadn't been done in an organization. It's actually why I have a job. So if you think about the expenditure that would represent, the investment in capital that the organization is making into digital procurement is unique, because you would think that they would be trying to put all those little coins and notes away to try to save them for a rainy day, but they recognize that the importance of getting purchasing right will aid parts of the organization to maintain a strong supply chain in general. Other things that we've been able to do in this year, and through our head of procurement, Amy Shee, have been to actually deploy a business partnering model and work with the actual business units, understand what they need, and present those benefits in their language rather than our own. And so that has boosted our presence in front of the business. Definitely one of the things that you want to be able to do is to actually go out and talk to people. And when the borders were open, we actually made the effort to go out to the sites to talk to individuals, to understand their requirements, understand some of the challenges that they were facing. And that has certainly helped, again, elevate that view of procurement across the business. So going right from the very tactical transactional stuff, purchasing through digital transformation, to the business partnering, to the engagement with senior people, understanding the problems and the solutions that we can bring. Certainly not wasted during COVID.
Thanks, Andrés. Martina, I'm interested in bringing you into the conversation now, particularly working for the public sector. We're seeing a lot of collaboration across government, so I'm really keen to hear, what's happening in your world with regards to procurement in the public sector and how it's being viewed.
Sure. Thanks, Sharon, and thanks for the opportunity. I'm excited to have the opportunity to show everyone or dispel the myth that government procurement professionals are not boring. Hopefully I can achieve that today. In terms of government, in the Australian government, the trend is really for decentralised procurement models. So the procurement function is largely an advisory function. It's the business areas that undertake the procurement. I think this sort of model really gives the business areas an opportunity to understand the complexity of procurement and have a greater appreciation for that. I think in the COVID environment, we've seen the business areas really lean in more on the support of the procurement teams, and particularly, the key focus for government is, business continuity, service continuity. What do we need to build into our procurements and our requirements? These central procurement teams in terms of really looking at how do we continue to deliver in a COVID environment, what sort of service delivery models, what sort of performance management frameworks do we need to put in place to ensure that our suppliers and therefore the government continue to deliver in this environment.
Right, thanks for that, Martina. Now just sort of thinking about the challenges you see in procurement and supply in the next 12 months. We've kind of gone through a lot in the last 12 to 18 months. Karla, perhaps I'll start with you. What is the single biggest challenge you see in procurement and supply as you look forward?
Yeah, sure. And I'm going to answer that. You've asked for the single, but I'm going to give you two key challenges that I see around me and across my networks. And the biggest one that I see, and it's certainly hitting us as an organisation at the moment, is both supply and pricing risk. And so what I mean by that is that we've got a lot of items that are coming to us from offshore. I'm sure a lot of organisations will be in a similar boat to that. And so shipping times and costs and delays are really playing a big part in terms of getting product onshore and then getting it out to where it needs to be. So that's a real challenge and a real, it is a risk to us as a business. And again, we're going back to leveraging some really good relationships to try and help us bridge that issue. And the other big challenge that I see in front of us at the moment is around talent. So we're here today talking about people, and I see that retaining talent is probably the one that comes to mind top for me. So retaining talent, like a lot of organisations, there's been a price freeze put across the New Zealand government. And I think that just makes it really attractive for a lot of people to go, well, do you know what? I'm not going to get a small price salary increase in my current organisation. What are others doing? And so if you're trying to retain really good talent, it means we have to think much more laterally about how we hold on to people. And so a lot of those points that we touched on in the CIPS and Hays surveys really come to the fore in terms of making sure that you hold on to those great people.
Terrific. And I'll look forward to unpacking that a little bit more when we bring Janelle into the conversation as well. But time, cost, delays. I'm wondering, Phil, whether you have a similar experience with Woolworths, your single biggest challenge over the next 12 months.
I think the second part from what Karla said is retention is probably the biggest thing for my team. I mean, it's a great problem to have when you've got team members that are really looking for the next opportunity in their career. They've done all the right things. They've gotten their MCIPS. They're waiting for that opportunity to come up. So, we're seeing some of the movement from our team members into the business, into the broader business, which is a great thing for us as a profession. I mean, not always great to lose great talent, but, to retain it within the business and be recognized within the business as this is someone I'd actually like to have outside of their remit in procurement to provide some value in other areas is a great thing. But yeah, it's definitely ensuring once you've got somebody that's fully trained and really has an expectation of moving to that next level because they've accomplished great things is a big challenge for us at Woolworths. That's within the team, external to the team, it's just continuing business momentum. It's very hard for us as a function to keep up with lockdowns and to keep up with the changing demands and the profiles around, for all of us as individuals, and home delivery is obviously a big thing for us all in isolation. And so, the procurement team to step in and to find partners that can provide us with transport for the last mile is just an absolute nightmare in these circumstances. So definitely, as the pandemic impacts us in society in different ways, it's the procurement function being able to keep up with those changes in demand, which impact us all as individuals. So yeah, it's a big challenge for us, but it's one that we've overcome, I suppose, Sharon. If I say that anything about the journey in the last 12 months has taught us that once we get in, as a profession, once we get a handle on it and we can manage it, with our partners, it pretty much becomes BAU. And so, the changes that the challenges that we had 12 months ago and now have just become BAU, and they operate, our team does a great job in dynamically changing to what the market requires. And so, yeah, but it's balancing that for the individuals.
Thanks, Phil. And Martina, tell us your thoughts in terms of what you're seeing in the public sector and procurement in the next 12 months.
Sure. So again, key issue resources. Firstly, from a procurement professional perspective, so we're in a candidate short market, so many projects going on in government at the moment, so there's a massive demand on particularly the contractor market, and lots of movement around there. And secondly, in terms of resources, I think it's internally for stakeholders, just getting the mind share of your stakeholders to, be able to, work through those procurements. There's so much, as I said, so much going on in government at the moment, and so many things that are considered higher priorities. It's really being able to, get your stakeholders on board and keep them engaged through what can be a very long procurement process. So I think, resources from both a procurement professional perspective and also from the business areas.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And we've had a question just come up, and if I can ask our panelists to have a think about it before I just head to Andrés with the same question I've asked Martina. Since the start of COVID till now, how has the business culture changed in your organisation? Is it more risk averse, agile, collaborative, outcome focused? Maybe just have a little think about that one, and I'll go to Andrés on this question here in terms of your challenge for the next 12 months. Andrés?
Thank you. Look, I think that if you're going to boil it down to one thing, is that translation of value. So moving the conversation away from savings. And I think that one of the biggest things that we've been able to do over the last year is to shift away from sort of a category model or a sourcing model to actually be business partners. And a lot of that results in a change in language and making sure that when people look at procurement, they look at procurement beyond the very simple dollars off the ticket price, look at the total cost of ownership, look at perhaps opportunities to engage with social, medium-sized, female-owned, disability enterprises, Indigenous enterprises, to actually bring that home to the organization and make sure that their understanding of what procurement is about, not purchasing, but procurement is about, is to actually deliver value at a broader sense. It will always be a challenge, but certainly when we have been sort of in a difficult year and there's been a strong focus on cost, and we've been able to deliver, which is great, now to shift the conversation to other forms of value will remain a challenge.
Thanks, Andrés. And that to some extent answers Kishore's question in terms of, you know, how you're changing the values and the mindsets within the business. Has anyone else got anything to add around, you know, how the business culture has changed? Anybody like to contribute to that? Phil?
I think there's less of you know, we're on the critical path for a lot of things now in the procurement function. I mean, there's different, you know, different organizations have different perspectives on their procurement functions and different responsibilities, but definitely for a non-trade area, the business will look to us to solve some of the problems that they've got, and it might not necessarily be just around, you know, a contractual position. And so I think the expectations have been risen by the business stakeholders because we did restructure and form so well to respond. It's almost, you know, we're now at that point where they say, okay, so you guys can actually do this. I'm not going to call you in at the end. I'm calling you in at the start. And, you know, so it's become, you know, it's a good problem. We're suffering for our own success. But yeah, the stakeholders definitely have an expectation now that we will service them at a level that they weren't expecting before.
It's a good thing. Phil, while I've got you talking about internal stakeholders, what are you thinking around the top skills that you are looking for when you're hiring a candidate? What are the top skills? You know, we've heard about influencing skills and communication. What are you looking for?
So I think that there's a very balancing act for us as a profession between, you know, listening and challenging together. And so for us, is the skill set that makes someone very successful in our environment is somebody that can partner and understand from the perspective of the business. And so we definitely need somebody that has that commercial lens, but also business understanding. And we, you know, so what can we do to make that work better? Well, we try to ensure that they've got the understanding of being a retailer. We make everybody in our team spend time in the business and spend time in the stores, working in a store to understand what it's really like to be on the floor. And so for us as a function, and then the other thing, we just make sure that we focus in on, you know, is this going to be an impact for the customer or not? And one thing that's, you know, the pleasure of working in Woolworths is that it's probably the closest I've ever been to the customer in a procurement role from all my other roles across different industries. But the other really cool thing is I am a customer myself. And so, you know, I can go into and experience the outcome from the team and see if it's really hitting the mark or not. And so, yeah, for me, you know, those are great things for us as procurement professionals.
Great, thanks, Phil. Karla, tell us about your area of work and what skills you're looking for in a candidate.
Yeah, a lot of that I can certainly relate to, and I'll just sort of acknowledge and build on that a little bit. And I suppose we've certainly moved away from going to market and looking for what I'd call a process jockey. You know, if I'm going to market and looking for skills, to me it is, I mean, it's such a cliche, but it is around the soft skills. If someone's got some fantastic commercial nous, they can get alongside people. The procurement stuff is easier to learn than the people skills. And so I'm really looking for that commercial acumen. I'm looking for someone who can come in and have a really crystal clear understanding of the organization's strategy and reason for being and how they can underpin and help support us achieve that. So it is also around fit. And so if I've got two people sitting alongside each other, I'm going to take the one who I think I can see fitting in our organisation and respectfully challenging, but getting a really good understanding. So Phillip, you said sort of that business lens, and it is absolutely that. It's, you know, we're not existing as a function to serve ourselves, we're existing to support and work alongside whichever business we're in, but we're around helping the business deliver. So it's got to be around being forward-looking, being proactive. You know, we talk a lot about whether procurement is engaged early at the start of a project. And I think if you sit back and go, oh, we weren't engaged, you've really got the wrong mindset. For me, I want people who are out talking to the business on a regular basis so they can say, oh, you're starting to think about a project, I reckon we can help you with that. So yeah, it is very much around the commercial and business savvy and the influencing and communication skills, definitely.
Terrific, thanks. I'm hearing you, the technical skill set, you know, that you can get that's easy. It's the personable, it's the fit. You know, how someone wanting to go to your organisation, Karla, how would they do that? How would they get the research? How would they build that knowledge before an interview?
Yeah, that's right. And I think, so there's a couple of different ways you can do that. And I often think to myself, when I'm advertising, for example, don't start your work on the day that you need to hire someone. You need to be building a profile and a brand of your organization beforehand. So if I was looking at getting into a different organization, I'd be doing all of my research on the internet around the company's website, etc., but also making sure that you're talking to different people across organizations to try and get a sense of what that company is like. And we'll touch on this again shortly, but I think being really deliberate with the information that you're sharing when you're trying to hire people can help with that as well.
Fantastic. Thanks, Karla. Andrés, have you got anything to build on those comments that have been made?
Yeah, look, there's obviously stuff that you assume that people should know, and I'll perhaps sort of challenge the notion that there are certain technical skills that you expect. There's a requirement that people have the understanding of procurement. I agree, procurement can be taught to people, and if you have that subject matter expertise, it makes it easier for you to have a conversation with the business. But we actually struggled for some of our more junior roles to find people who actually had done procurement. You asked a candidate and they would say, I've run parts of a procurement process, but I've never run it the whole way. And you kind of think, wait a minute, this is a procurement role. I need you to be able to actually deliver on the whole thing. Now, technical things aside, I agree, it is just sort of a thing you need to take, and that's where qualifications become important, is influencing. And I want to make the difference between influencing and actually telling people what to do or arriving with, a conclusion. There's an old saying that you don't want to lead anyone anywhere, because if you lead them there, then somebody can lead them out of it. And what you want to be able to do is actually influence their thinking so they arrive at the conclusion that you wanted them to arrive. And to be able to do that, you need to be able to speak their language. So from an influencing perspective, I think if you're able to actually work with people, talk to them, listen to what they have to say, put your KPIs a little bit to the side and focus on what matters to them, their agenda, their goals, their own KPIs, and you're able to blend those two things in a sort of organic way rather than a discussion about, well, I'm here to do what I need to do. I don't know what you're doing. You'll be able to influence them and track along with that. So probably since that's the biggest thing. People who don't shy away from a negotiation, and again, it's very similar to what we were just talking about. Negotiation is one of those really important skills when you're trying to deliver value. If you are actually just relying on the outcome of an RFX event to bring whatever value you're looking for, you're actually very, very much likely to be leaving money on the table. So you need to be able to have structured, organized negotiations with your suppliers to make sure that you tick all those different boxes. Today, it might be a negotiation about price, but tomorrow it might be a negotiation about, hey, what's your supply chain like? Are you sure that you're not exposed to any risk of modern slavery or child exploitation or illegal mining somewhere in a remote location in the world? That ability to actually have those difficult discussions is really important, because if you just let it pass and think that it's a tick box exercise and trusting the procurement process, which is great, to do your job for you, you're going to fail. So you need to be able to bring that in as well.
Great, thank you. And Martina, I just want to get your thoughts on this. I'm someone wanting to start in the public sector. What are you going to tell them the top skills they need to think about and project?
Thanks, Sharon. Look, I think sometimes people think that there's, talk about government procurement as it's very different. It's a very different world. And in some respects, there's a greater level of, I guess, probably documentation, rigor, transparency requirements, reporting, that sort of boring level. But when it comes down to it, really, it is just the same as in the private sector. It's about people and more about people than about process. And I agree with what everybody said in terms of having that really strong relationship development skills, engagement skills, great commercial judgment. And just to take it a step further, I think, if we talk about those personal attributes, I really think passion is key. I refer to myself as a procurement nerd. I just love it. And I love it because it's all about sharing with people and it's about skills transfer. So I love the idea that I can walk into a business area and know nothing about the subject and I come out with a whole kit bag full of interesting things about mental health or printing or a broad variety of things. And importantly, the person that I'm working with comes out with a really great appreciation of what procurement's all about and how it can help them to get the outcomes that they want. So I think those personal attributes are really important as well.
Thank you. Passion, definitely. That's perfect. I'm going to now just jump to Karla, because we're wanting to get a bit of an understanding around how you build a more inclusive procurement function. We've talked a lot about ED&I at the start of today's forum. If you can just talk through a case study, please. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So touch briefly on my experience in my current organisation, and I think where it starts for me is being really broad with your definition of diversity and inclusiveness. So we'll often talk straight into making sure you've got a good gender mix, for example. But when I'm recruiting and when I'm looking at the makeup of my team, I want to be really deliberately broad about how I think about ED&I. And so that's the starting point for me. So when I look around the table, I want to see a bunch of people who in their own respective ways look and sound different to me. And so one of the things that really comes to mind that I've become much more conscious of in the last few years is both unconscious bias, so making sure that I'm really deliberate again about what I'm looking for and about either the people that I gravitate towards or don't, but also making sure even really basic things like job ads. So once I've written a job ad, I'll go back and look at it again and I'll say to myself, is there anything in this job ad that might preclude somebody who I'd really love to talk to from applying? I work in a farming organisation, and so I'll go back and look at my ad and I'll make sure that we don't have any language in there that might put off a woman candidate, just for sort of an easy example. So I'm trying to make sure that that we're recruiting in a way that's really deliberate, open and accessible, and that we're being really broad about our thinking on what diversity looks like. The other point for me is around making sure that I've got a good diverse hiring panel, and again that comes back to helping me with my unconscious bias. That means that we've got some good diversity of thinking around the table, who can challenge me around what I'm looking for and who I'm seeking to hire. And I think what it comes down to, and this is kind of probably becoming increasingly obvious for all of us, but worth a mention anyway, the more diversity we can get around our teams, the more thought and diverse views can go into our decision making, and that leads to better outcomes, I think, for all of us.
Well said, thank you. Just in the interest of time, I'm just going to move to two panellists and ask one question. I'm going to get the Australian and then perhaps the New Zealand experience on this question. Andrés, I'm going to move to you. Zero immigration seems to have caused a severe skills shortage, both in Australia and New Zealand. Just briefly, how do you address this challenge and ensure that you've got the right capabilities in the team? And I might go to New Zealand next, Karla.
Look, I think if you're looking at new skills, it isn't always necessary to look outside. I know that myself, being an immigrant, there is definitely people coming into the country and adding value that way. But there's a lot of great people here in Australia already here. And to the point around diversity, it's actually tapping into different sources of talent. I actually currently have someone in my team who was on retirement, and we were able to lure him out of retirement to actually come back and support the project that I was working on. So that diversity, not only of gender or origin, but also diversity in age, you'll find there's so many good people here. Second thing that you want to do is also be very clear around development plans. And it's not just a piece of paper that somebody fills out at the beginning of the year saying, oh, I one day want to do this or learn that, but actually actively work towards enhancing the skills that your existing people have. So look outside, try to find that extra bit of talent wherever it might be hiding locally, but also internally in your organization. Look at ways of developing your own team. Look at plans and projects and activities that you can actually do, and sit down with your team and teach them stuff. You'd be surprised how often they go, oh, I didn't know that. That's so helpful. And they've been able to actually enhance their own skills through things that were free for us. It's just the time that we had. So there are those two areas of focus and things that you can do. But inevitably, we will need a bit more talent coming into Australia. And might I say, it's important that we get people straight out of uni to get into procurement and invite students straight out of TAFE, straight out of other vocational studies, and people investing in procurement to actually have a well-trained and well-qualified base of professionals in Australia. So that will be a challenge for all of us. And I'm sure it'll be a challenge in New Zealand as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I probably, Karla, Andrés may have already answered the question about building capabilities within, but do you have anything to add there just briefly?
Yeah, look, I think very little to add to that, what he said. But yeah, certainly, depending on what industry or what sector you're recruiting for in New Zealand, the skills shortage is definitely hitting us hard as well. With my own organisation, we look to a lot of people from offshore to fill contingent labour requirements, so that's definitely a challenge. But all of those suggestions and investing, and not always just in money terms, but investing in your people. And I find for me, one of the best ways in which that we retain and develop our existing people is by making sure that they're really invested and really understand our business, because the more invested they get, the more aligned they are with the purpose, the more that the retention just becomes a natural progression off the back of that. So yeah, I agree.
Thank you. I'm just going to invite Janelle back onto the panel, and we're going to quick fire through these questions. And the first question I'm going to put out is, hi panel, I'm currently not a people leader and would like to progress in a leadership role, but almost all leadership positions require leadership experience. Any advice, please?
Yes.
Andrés, Janelle?
Yeah, this is certainly a common reason why people, reach out to organisations like Hays, is, to get that opportunity to act or to, have the exposure. So I think on the point of retention, if that's something that's available to, employers to be able to consider internal options before going external for a contractor or a new position, that upskilling is very key to the retention, and that's essentially how you're going to get the opportunity to be considered for a management level role, is having some exposure to that.
Yeah, and certainly asking your manager too to support you and help mentor you into those leadership positions as well. Thank you. Well, I've got you, Janelle. There's a question here. What is the difference, percentage or dollars, an average salary of a permanent employee versus a contractor?
Yeah, definitely. So for ACT, this is 80% of the market that I recruit for here in Canberra is actually for contractors. The federal government is a huge market here in Canberra for us. So, the candidate pool is quite limited for those permanent employees, because that balance is that for what someone might get for a salary of about 120,000 for what would be a lead role or an executive level position here in Canberra, we have at times paid a 20% casual loading on top of that for contractors. But at the moment, it's far exceeding that, which is definitely a challenge for both, employers managing the cost of a project, and also managing candidate expectations. But, it is a very lucrative market, the contracting market, and, there is often a less risk in terms of 3 months here or 6 months there, that organisations are actually retaining contractors for very long periods of time. We're talking sort of 3 or 4 years, moving across a variety of projects. So there's a significant difference, and that's what has really driven our increases to salaries over the last 12 months.
Thanks, Janelle. Phil, I might direct this next question to you. Can you just share a quick example of how procurement in your organisation has been able to add value when COVID started? I'm thinking toilet paper distributed online as quickly as possible, but you may have some more specific examples.
I first spoke to a little bit of that. One that I didn't mention before was how great it was for us as professionals to come together. We worked very closely with Lisa and the guys in Qantas at the early onset of COVID. And, we had, I think it was over 100 organisations of the procurement professionals that we contacted where we thought they were impacted and they may have excess capacity, i.e. they might not need all the toilet paper. And people would say, for the Qantas guys, it was quite bizarre for them. Why is the procurement guys at Woolworths calling us about toilet paper? The reality was every roll of toilet paper we got from Qantas was one more that we could make available on the shelves. It wasn't to resell it. it was just to make sure that our team members didn't use the stuff that could have gone on the shelves. And so I think that the creativity and the thinking about how can we solve the problem collectively as a profession was a great outcome from the COVID response. I think it was one of many that we got, where it just reinforced to me that, if I call upon, my fellow procurement professionals, that they will find a way to make it work for all of us, which was great. I mean, in some cases, it was the first time that a procurement professional had sold excess stock, to another procurement person. So I can imagine negotiations would be quite tricky for that. But anyway, a bit of fun. But yeah, definitely helping each other was a great thing.
Great, terrific example. Janelle, I'm just going to bring you into the conversation. Something's just come up on the chat bar that I'd like to address, and I know we're running out of time. Person has a number of years of experience, attempting to make a transition out of this industry into procurement roles in other industries. Despite all this experience and a CIPS diploma, is finding it very challenging to even secure an interview. Most advice suggestions so far have been hiring managers simply finding it easier to poach staff in similar roles. So there's a lot of poaching going on by the looks of things. Any advice there on how to secure an interview?
Yes, I would, I guess, firstly, probably say if you aren't already engaged with a specialist recruiter in the procurement space, it's very challenging for candidates applying for jobs to understand, what's the nature of the role, what's the background of the position, and how do I sell myself forward to this role. If you are engaging with a specialist recruiter like Hays, we can often give you some advice in regards to how to approach the position if it's not one that we're already working on. But equally, making your application a little bit more three-dimensional for us to be able to have a conversation with the potential employer around what you can bring to the role. Because often some roles are advertised to effectively put someone into a position that they've been already acting in, and you can't always see that from a position that's advertised. So please reach out to me and I can see if I can provide any support after this session.
Thanks, Janelle. And just there's an observation from Jeremy that who's looking for roles, but often he's competing against people who are stepping down because of redundancies. Are you seeing this? Is this a phenomenon that's happening?
Yeah, definitely. Not so much redundancies. We haven't seen a huge amount of that in the procurement space because the skill shortages is quite tight. But we definitely see people at that retirement age where they're wanting to sort of not have those executive level roles and be more, less responsibility, but come in and do a good job. So, but yeah, that said, the lack and the limited availability of candidates, I don't think that that's going to be sort of something that we continue to see this year, as organisations are more likely to, sort of look at, upskilling people who don't, fit all the requirements for a position.
Great, thank you. Look, we have run out of time. Thank you for all your valuable insights. I think I've learned a lot, and I can see by the engagement of our community on chat and on Q&As. We haven't got to all of your questions, so we will endeavour to answer those afterwards via email. But thanks again for everybody's contribution, and a sincere thanks to our panellists of experts. Thank you. Please do make sure before you leave today's session that you do fill out our survey and provide feedback on how we've gone today, and provide some ideas on how we should, what sort of webinars we should do in the future. Also, just before I close, I encourage you to keep an eye out for our events. We've got another exciting one coming up, Women Leaders in Procurement and Supply, where I'll be interviewing fellows female leaders from across the globe. So that'll be a real special one. So make sure you look out for all of our communications, and do join us next time. But until then, please do keep safe. And thanks again, everybody, for participating.
Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.